Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse for Democrats, they receive horrific news out of the state of Colorado as the Colorado Supreme Court has officially rejected Democrat plans for redistricting. And yes, this is real. You actually had the Colorado Supreme Court intervene and say, no, 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 you can't do this. And I know it's technically a nonpartisan court. I get that. But guys, all 7 of the justices on the Colorado Supreme Court, they were picked by Democrat governors. So you cannot just say, well, it's all nonpartisan and really they're all secret Republicans. No, they were all picked by Democrat governors. And it was a shocking result here. No one really thought they would intervene and say, no, you cannot actually go through with this referendum. The Colorado Supreme Court dealt a significant blow to Democrat hopes to redraw the state's congressional maps ahead of the 2028 election. The twin ballot initiatives they had sought in order to redistrict in an off year had violated the state constitution. So yeah, this doesn't just impact 2026 because realistically speaking, there was no way Democrats were able to redraw Colorado in time. In fact, the primaries are tomorrow. So yeah, that was impossible. And you have the state constitution, they don't allow it. But what they were trying to do is they were trying to get a referendum through this year and then in 2027 redraw the map to give them a big advantage. That was their plan for 2028. But this doesn't just impact 26. No, their plans for redistricting are dead for 28. Unless something crazy happens, they're screwed. The court found that the 2 ballot proposals violated the single subject requirement governing such measures in Colorado law. Democrats have sought to satisfy that mandate by submitting 2 separate questions, one to conduct an off-year redistricting and the other to suspend the state's independent redistricting commission. So, as you can tell, Colorado, they don't really allow for you to jam 1,000 different things in one referendum, which is just common sense. Seriously, I don't get why this isn't the basic standard in every state, but either way, you get the point that in Colorado, you can't include 500 different things. It must be related to one single subject. And they try to get around it by saying, no, these are 2 completely separate questions. However, each initiative included a clause stating that it would take effect only if the other proposal were also approved by voters this November. Yeah, so they actually screwed themselves over by saying, oh, this is totally separate. But by the way, this only goes into effect if you vote yes on the other referendum. Now you understand why the Colorado Supreme Court, even though it's 7-0 Democrat, even they realized, no, this is horseshit. You cannot just say these are separate referendums, but say, oh, by the way, vote yes on the other one for it to actually go in effect. No, you can't do that. That amounted to disqualifying evidence that the Democrats were trying to sidestep the single subject rule the state's high court ruled. We conclude that the result is not different and that when a measure's effectiveness is expressly contingent on the passage of a separate and independent measure, the measure contains multiple subjects, just as if the measures were combined into one. And they're right. Like, this is just common sense. I cannot believe Democrats really thought this was going to work. Like, this was their Hail Mary. I get it. They have to try something. But here's the issue. You have to still follow the law. You cannot just ignore it. You would have thought after Virginia, they would have realized, hey, maybe we should make sure we're doing this properly. We're not playing a game. We're not trying to game the system. No, they don't even care. They just assumed, yeah, it's going to pass no matter what. There's no way any judge would allow this to not go in effect. Well, they were wrong. This was a failure. How would you screw this up? Like, I get it. You have to make sure that you get the stuff through. I get that. But you're telling me that your plan was to violate the law to such a degree that even Democrat judges are saying, no, you cannot do this. The decision throws the entire redistricting effort into doubt. Democrats were already working on a tight deadline to collect the necessary signatures and get the ballot proposal before voters this November. Colorado was one of Democrats' top targets in the next phase of the national redistricting wars, which now they can't do anything. They basically are stuck because now what do? You really you can't try this again. You cannot say, "Oh, it's two separate referendums." No, unless you word it in a way that I guess magically makes it work. But even then, you still theoretically you have to connect the two somehow. And that's the issue here. Democrats are screwed. If they get rid of the commission, well, sorry, but it doesn't really impact things until 2030 or 2032. And you say, well, we're going to redraw in 2027. That would just be the commission's doing. Like the commission would just redraw the map. You see the problem here? They had to get both of them through somehow. And really, there's no way. This was their only pathway to game the system and hope the Supreme Court of Colorado would say, yep, it's perfectly fine. But even they saw through the bullshit that no, you cannot double dip into the same issue and connect the two with this weird clause. But it's just baffling to me that they didn't think this through. They just assumed it's going to go through no matter what. Democrats had hoped to draw as many as 3 new blue-leaning districts ahead of the congressional elections in 2028. And that's why this is a big deal. We're not talking about a single congressional seat like Maryland, which again, they're having issues in Maryland. Not just one. We're talking about 3 seats that are either leaning Republican or safe Republican that could flip. But now they can't do that. Only Virginia and New York could provide a bigger haul of newly gerrymandered seats for Democrats for the next election cycle. And even then, do they try again in Virginia? They spent all their political capital on that referendum, and it barely passed. It barely passed by, like, what, 3 points? And what should have been an easy victory for them, it barely went through. You pissed off half of Virginia, and it still got struck down. And there's legal issues with that. And same thing with New York. They try this stunt every year in New York. Oh, we're going to redraw it. And then some court says, no, you can't do it. And every time it seems like it benefits the GOP. So Virginia and New York, I guess they could try, like New York's trying to referendum and Virginia, they may try again. But really, Colorado was seen as the easiest one. Now, it doesn't look like they have anything. Without Colorado, Democrats plan to draw even with or possibly ahead of Republicans in 2028 faces an unknown future. They can't. They needed Colorado because now in 2028, you're going to have states like South Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Indiana, Kentucky. All these states are prepared to draw in 2027 and 2028. Possibly Georgia and a few other states. Democrats have New York. Maybe. Maybe they can redraw Virginia. But again, those are maybes. That's the issue here. They needed Colorado as a safety net, and they're not getting that. The success of this partisan attempt to sideline Coloradans from responding to Donald Trump's unprecedented mid-decade redistricting scheme is disappointing, said Curtis Hubbard, a spokesperson for Coloradans for a level playing field. Oh gosh, again, they're losing their minds over this because they really thought that if you ignore the law completely and just this blatant, they didn't even try, that, hey, we're perfectly fine, everybody. Turns out, no. Your plan failed, and they're losing their shit. While Trump and his allies regularly sidestep the law and ignore voters, efforts to respond have once again been dealt a legal setback over technicality. Oh, good Lord. A technicality? Really? You morons violated the law. You ignored it. You ignored the law and tried to play games with it, and it failed. And instead of realizing that, they really have convinced themselves, oh my goodness, it's a technicality. because they are not they're not used to losing these legal battles. They tend to win them, but not this time. In fact, it failed miserably and they can't process it. It's like, wait, we lost? This is an attack on democracy. Just, it's unbelievable. These people exist. They actually believe this. That's a scary part. They have convinced themselves that this is a mastermind scheme by Trump, and they probably think these judges are MAGA appointees. When in reality, no, they just realize that they violated the law. They try to sidestep it. Like that's all that happened here. So yeah, they're losing their minds over it because they know they're screwed. Democrats now must start over to try to change state law, and under an incredibly compressed timeline. To place a fresh ballot initiative before voters this November, organizers will need to obtain signatures from roughly 125,000 voters before August 3rd, which that's not going to happen. Because signature gathering can be a wildly unpredictable process, the Democratic organizers have been aiming to file roughly 200,000 signatures per initiative, and they still had a ways to go. According to a legal brief filed last week, organizers had roughly 43,000 signatures per initiative. So even the current ones were failing. They might have reached that goal at the end of the day, but it was going to be borderline. Now they have to try again. They have to try yet again on a new initiative. But like we said before, how can you do this if you need two separate measures? And you're screwed either way. One doesn't impact things until 2031 or whatever, and the other one will just kick it to the commission. You need both of them. And the Colorado Supreme Court said, nope, you can't do that. You cannot play games like that. Actually, follow the law. That's all they had to do here. But now, they're going to try and play games. They're going to try again, I guarantee you. But just, they were way behind schedule, and this legal setback probably killed any chances of getting any referendum done before 2028. That's a big deal. We shall see what happens, but this is a huge win for the GOP and one of the biggest failures for Dems. Not as bad as Virginia, because Virginia, they spent, what, $80 million, and they barely won, and they pissed off half the state, and it still failed. This was just a legal setback. But for the long-term impact of for 2028 and 2030, this is a big win for the GOP. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.